Idaho chapter. And I wanted to thank you all for registering and attending today. Looks like we've got 21 people in here so far, but I bet more will show up as they're leaving from their other meetings. The title is Managing People and Mother Nature, Construction Management by Matt Wilson, who you see on right there. And let's see, I just have a couple of housekeeping here. So one is for PDU reporting. Bam, there it is, under materials in your control panel. There's a PDU instructions, pretty simple. You have a lot of leeway. You get to decide if it's strategic, technical, or leadership, and it's 1 credit. Okay, you will have access to the slide deck. Let's see, if you don't see it, it's not in the materials right now, but it will become available. Cheryl, I might need your assistance on refreshing me on how that works.
Well, hi, Jen. So I don't actually have a copy of the slide deck. So as soon as I have it, yes, we can put it out there. In fact, if during the presentation, if you want to email it to me, Matt, or email it to Jen, and she can forward it on to me, I can sneak it into the managed materials for a download, or we can just email it to folks after the presentation, whatever you'd like.
Okay, sounds good. I'll probably just email it to you after the presentation if that works.
Okay, so I'll email it to everybody after the presentation then. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much, both Matt, Cheryl, appreciate it. Let's see, so next month we have January 13th, the next topic is People-Centered Project Management, Achieving a Better Outcome with a Holistic Approach by 71 and Change. And we're gonna have 2 speakers from 71 and Change, and I think they might be on the call today, which is really nice that they wanted to come and visit us the month before and see how it works. So, and let's see if I have the names right. I think it's Ryan and I'm gonna ask ahead of time for next month. I don't know, I'm gonna butcher the name. Is it Dia or Dia?
It's Dia, yes. Thank you, you got it right.
All right.
Yes, Dia Katule. We look forward to joining you next month.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we are looking for speakers for February and beyond. And remember, we always take July and August off. So please come and let me know if you want to speak in the future. But for today, we have Matt Wilson, the famous twin brother of our VP of Professional Development, David Wilson. So he is project manager for Record. Do you say record or record?
Yeah, it's Record Steel Construction Incorporated.
For Record Steel Construction Incorporated, RSCI. Matt has served as a project manager in the heavy civil construction industry for the last 10 years, successfully managing the building of complex and challenging wastewater treatment plants around the Pacific Northwest United States. His combination of field and academic experience is extremely beneficial on nearly any type of project. Matt's leadership, work ethic, and management skills ensure project success on even the most challenging jobs. Welcome, Matt Wilson. Thank you for coming and doing this today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Well, hey guys, I'm super happy to be here. Again, really just kind of got invited from my twin brother David, who's the VP of the PMI Western Idaho chapter here. So really excited to get into it. Really, I think, from my perspective as a project manager, I really want to kind of talk to you guys about really kind of the 2 most challenging things that I see kind of in our industry as a manager, which is managing people and Mother Nature. And so just to give you kind of a quick introduction here, I didn't quite frankly get into the construction industry envisioning that I would be, building poop plants, right? But as my career started off, I really enjoyed the heavy civil type of projects, projects with big concrete, massive earthwork, big process piping, big electrical, the big boy stuff, right? So that's kind of what I enjoyed kind of as my career started to take off here. It wasn't until really I got into my current employer, RSCI, that I had the opportunity to really live on site and work on a wastewater treatment plant for about a year over in Twin Falls. It was in that time that I really discovered really how they work, and really just they're full of challenges and very technical work. And so anyway, I've got quite a bit of experience in this trade, and I'm trying to kind of give you about 10 good years of project management, about 45 minutes here. So bear with me on, and I'm also trying to make it a little bit more applicable. I think this audience is project managers, probably from all kinds of different industries, and construction is certainly very specialized. So I'm going to kind of give you my managing people side of things, and then Mother Nature, which is a little more construction oriented. But there'll be a lot of good stories, I think, photos that you guys will enjoy with that part of it. So I just want to kind of give you a background here. This photo is actually a project we did over in Grand Teton National Park over in Moose, Wyoming. This is actually a potable water tank we built to provide potable water to that town. That was kind of in the middle of the construction, and this is what it looked like at the end of the day. So needless to say, lots of Mother Nature issues on that job that we had to overcome. So but it was a successful project. So really, I want to get into the goal of the presentation here, which again is to really just advance you guys, the audience, your own practice and profession in the project management of your career through kind of sharing my perspective as a wastewater treatment plant builder, lessons learned, my perspectives of the heavy civil construction industry. And I think you guys will find that we're probably not too far. My lessons learned are probably in a lot of ways applicable to what you guys do out there. So, and again, enjoy my stories, and I hope you enjoy the photos as well. So, just kind of a quick outline of my presentation. I'm just going to kind of keep to these basic topics. I'm going to talk about managing people, managing Mother Nature. I'll kind of close it off with my biggest takeaways I hope you take with you. And then kind of open up to questions, comments, that sort of thing. So I'll jump into managing people. So I'm going to start with managing yourself, right? I want to talk a little bit about early on in my career, I worked underneath the project manager, and there's a phrase he always used to say, which was, that's a field problem, right? And I remember just hearing the resentment from the field guys with that kind of a phrase or that kind of attitude into the project, right? If you think about it, it's a pretty selfish term, but it's surprisingly enough, it's in this industry, and I've heard it. And I think really the reason is because this project manager had kind of elevated into a project management role, but had really not spent the time in the field to understand how things actually go together. And quite frankly, I think that crippled him in a lot of ways and created a bunch of resentment within the construction team from them. So, early on in my career, I was almost learning, from people by working underneath them. And it was kind of through that experience that I was determined, hey, I need to go out there in the field. If I'm going to be serious about this construction industry, I need to be out there in the field. I need to learn how things actually get done. So my message to you guys, kind of like the first word of advice here, is never miss an opportunity to learn something new. And to really lead your teams, you need to be able to, give them direction. And I think in the construction industry in particular, you really can't fake it, especially if you're in the heavy civil type projects. There's a lot that can go wrong if you don't do it the right way. I mean, people can die, lost productivity, large amounts of cash lost, schedule delays, that sort of thing. So, early on in your career, like feel free, like as you're becoming a project manager and that sort of thing, take the time to learn something new and really get to that point where, it's no longer a field problem. It is our problem. And I was lucky enough to get to a point in my career before I became a project manager where, it's like I'd seen just about everything. So it wasn't hard for me to, work with the field staff and find a solution to get things done on time and safely. So That's one suggestion I have for you. The other thing is kind of like continuing to manage yourself, work-life balance, right? And everybody's different, right? But kind of the status quo is, the more you work, the more money you'll get, the better your career will go. But you also got a home and family life, right? You got to find that balance, and also find that balance with your spouse. And then the only other thing I would say, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on kind of like motivational speech. I'm trying to keep this geared towards project management in particular, but I love Arnold Schwarzenegger has a great motivational speech from graduation. He's got 6 rules for success. I encourage you guys to go check that out. And part of that speech is really just kind of like planning your day, and that's planning your life. Plan and even put it in writing. Hey, if go exercise, work on your health. Do things with your family. Do these sort of things with work and that sort of thing. So. Anyway, so that's the next thing. Just really working on yourself as far as managing people, work-life balance. The next thing I have is really just organization. In the construction industry, the most valuable tool on the whole project is the schedule, right? And as project managers, you guys should be managing the schedule. It really sets the tone, and it really identifies for your team, hey, what is the priority, right? On a wastewater treatment plant, those jobs are usually 2 years long, right? So you got to prioritize that. We've got 2 years worth of paperwork to push, and 2 years worth of earth and concrete and masonry and building and process piping and all this stuff to go in. You as a project manager, hopefully you've gained that field experience. You understand how things are put together. And then you can put together a schedule, and then be able to organize and have, divvy up and delegate tasks for your team to prioritize and get that job built as quickly as possible. Because when you build as fast as possible, you're going to make the most amount of money. Those two things go hand in hand. I have a few other little tidbits, and maybe I'm sure most of you guys are proficient at this, but a few little suggestions I have for people, just small little things I think that can help you in your professional career. The first thing is always bring a notebook with you. I can't tell you how many times I've had a young project assistant come into my office with no notebook. And I know full well I'm about to give him 20 tasks, and he's going to give me a deer in the headlights look, and he's got nothing written down. I know that this guy isn't going to deliver on all those tasks, right? So, and even as a project manager, when people come into my room or my office here and they don't have a notebook, I tell them, like, get out, go get a notebook, come back, and then we can actually get started. And I think that's one small thing. Just make sure that you have a notebook to make sure that you're writing down your tasks, because at least in my industry, a meeting can be 20 different tasks. And the thing about construction is, let's just say, like in construction, there's 100 tasks to do. This isn't college where if you only do 95 of them, you get an A, right? No, this is real world, real life. 100 out of 100 tasks need to be done. And if you let one slip through the crack, it can have a major ripple effect across the project, create substantial delays and costs. And so organization is key to making sure you don't let anything slip through the cracks. And same thing, honestly, with your emails. One piece of advice I have for you guys on your emails: just make sure, for me, I have an inbox, and that is just where, kind of proverbial people put something on my desk, and I got to look at it. If it's an action item, I get that action item complete, and then I'll file it away in my project folder. And that's a quick way to make sure nothing slips through the cracks on your email side of things too. Okay, and then the next thing I want to talk about as far as managing yourself is, having a great attitude, right? So I want you guys all to imagine, right? Let's say you have like a hard day at work and it's been a grind and you're just miserable, and you come home and you got a puppy dog sitting there waiting for you. And it doesn't matter that you forgot to feed him or give him water. You really kind of let him down today, but you show up and it doesn't matter what happened or what's going on in the day. He's super excited to see you. He's super excited to take on whatever the next activity is that you're doing at home, right? And I think as project managers, if you can kind of take that mentality into your day-to-day life, somebody comes in your office, and you might be grinding and it might kind of suck, but if you can just like check yourself and say, hey man, like let's be excited to be here, because being excited and having that energy for your team, it's contagious, right? And your energy can have so much motivation to your team and the people working with you. So, people want to work with this puppy dog that you see on the screen. They don't want to work with some grumpy guy just kind of mumbling in his office. So that might be the most important thing, I think, for you guys. Just remember to check yourself, and even when things get tougher on the grind, just really bring that attitude of even a puppy dog. Just be excited to be there. Let's see. So next thing I want to talk about is managing other people. And the biggest takeaway I have here, and there's a lot of different ways and approaches to managing people. I'm going to give you kind of I figured the biggest kind of philosophy that I've taken with me, and actually didn't really come through my experience in the early construction, but it was back when Dave and I were playing football for Boise State University. We played underneath Coach Pete, and we were in the same class as Kelmore, right? It was from 2007 to 2011. Our class was 15-3 wins versus losses, so we were pretty good. Actually, we were the winningest football class in college football history at the time, and I think there's been a few other classes that have tied that record, but needless to say, Coach Pete had a lot of things going right for him, and he had some really good philosophies. And I wanted to share with you guys kind of this one philosophy he had that I've really taken with me, and it's transitioned perfectly into construction. And that is this really. He said, it's real easy for football coaches to develop a certain coaching style, right? Some coaches develop a style of hey, a football player does something wrong. Well, let's get in their face and let's go, yell at them and just kind of really kind of verbally, make sure that they clearly understand that they did something wrong, so that they're motivated to fix it. And they kind of do it in front of like a group too, so like other people kind of hear it, like, oh man, that guy's getting chewed out, right? And that can be motivating, because some people are like, oh well, I don't want to get embarrassed or get yelled at again, so I'm going to make sure I fix my form or don't do that mistake again. But at the same time, other personalities, football players, not all of them have the same personalities. So that kind of management approach or that coaching approach isn't really applicable for every personality. The other side of it is like some football players would react much better if, you just take them aside and you say, hey man, look, this is what you did wrong. It's a very quiet conversation. It's really just between, the coach and the player, and it's not public and it's not out there in the open, right? And so that's another coaching approach. And quite frankly, it takes a little bit of a time as a manager or even as a coach to figure out a player or a teammate, what is their personality? What is it that makes them tick, right? But as a good project manager, you can quickly identify those personalities. You can quickly identify like, hey, what is the management approach to getting the maximum effort out of this person to reach that common goal that our team has, right? So that is probably my biggest thought for you guys as managers is, don't manage the game or don't coach the game. You got to coach the player, not the game. So I hope that makes sense in a lot of ways. I know it definitely transitions into the construction industry. For example, I'm not going to go manage this tough-looking construction worker on the left as I would this really sweet-looking, engineer on the right. And in particular, I think a lot of that goes to, trying to figure out people's personalities. I think that correlates a lot with, their livelihood. So, for example, the person on the left, right, the construction worker, his livelihood is construction. It's about getting the job done on time, getting it done productively, perhaps getting that bonus, and that is his livelihood. It's not so much about feelings or, making sure that, you're not, humiliated necessarily, right? For those guys, their livelihood is go out there, get the job done, and get paid, right? So that kind of like that livelihood, that kind of whole flow of livelihood really translates into their personality. Whereas you go to the right and you look at an engineer, right? Their livelihood is doing business for owners, right? So how they get business from owners isn't necessarily awarded based on price. They get business by relationships, right, and proposals and experience of designing and engineering projects of similar size and scope. So from an engineering standpoint, their livelihood is making sure that when they do a project, they design it and they do the construction management part of it and the design during construction, that they look good doing it, right? So that's another suggestion, I think, maybe to quickly kind of figure out people's livelihood, or figure out people's livelihood can oftentimes kind of help you figure out their personalities and how to motivate them best. So the next thing I want to jump into is managing people and really disputes. I'm going to get into really on the construction side, it really can get messy with contracts and that sort of thing. I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but I want to say that if you I want to back up here real quick and get into early on in my career, I had really kind of misfortune of getting promoted to a PM and then walking to a buzzsaw of a project with a really combative engineer and owner. And what ended up happening was those guys were just hammering us on the letter of the law and the letter of the contract. And I think the only reason why I wasn't fired and I still work here today is because I got into the weeds of it and got in a contract, and contracts are, quite frankly, they're just double-edged swords. You get into it, it cuts both ways, and from my experience, nobody wins. The contractor loses money, the engineer loses repeat business with the owner, and the owner ends up blowing their budget for the project and having maybe poor quality or late projects, which can have other financial impacts on them. But for the most part, the majority of my projects, have, I'd almost say that first project that I managed really kind of chiseled me in a lot of ways. It kind of sharpened my mind and kind of understanding those contracts, which could help further mitigate kind of those disputes and that sort of thing. And really, it comes down to communication, right? I want to show this kind of photo here, which is really kind of from Rocky here, but if you can imagine, you have a contractor and an engineer, and they're working together, and they kind of have this attitude, right, of working together and looking good doing it, right? If you can kind of set that team environment on your project, things go well, right? The contractor, you'll make money, you'll find ways of doing things that don't sacrifice quality, but can help you make money. The engineer looks good because the projects, again, continue to mitigate delays or cost impacts to the owner, and there's no disputes, because I can tell you, owners do not like having to sit there in meetings and listen to the contractor and engineer debate, costs or delays and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a hard thing to do, but if you can establish kind of that team goal relationship, and really it's just establishing common goals in the beginning of the project, and find ways to make each other look good. If you can do that, that's a good way to avoid disputes. Another thing I want to talk to you about is early on when I was a project manager, I think there's a natural response for people to be hesitant to give bad news. I think that's just a natural thing, but the reality is you need to provide notice to people as soon as something happens. As soon as a problem happens, you got to give notice as soon as possible. And quite frankly, you need to put it in writing, because even if a dispute elevates to litigation, that sort of thing, the first thing the lawyers or the judges are going to ask are, well, did you provide proper notice, right? And the contract always says, did you provide proper notice? And fundamentally, it makes so much sense, right? Give notice so that people have the opportunity to mitigate the delay or the cost impact or the problem, whatever it may be, right? You got to put that stuff on the table so it can be addressed. And the sooner you can find out what those problems might be, the sooner that people can find solutions to mitigate them and avoid delays and cost impacts. So maybe if you're a younger PM out there, another piece of advice I have for you is, don't feel bad about giving bad news. Think of it as, hey, we're putting this problem on the table to mitigate it, right? And you got to give those people the notice so they have the opportunity to mitigate it. So if you can kind of think about it that way, I think hopefully you can kind of get over kind of that natural feeling of not trying to give bad news to people. So really, I mean, I think that's kind of like the quick and dirty kind of, obviously there's much more I could kind of dive into, but I think that's kind of my highlights, and I think the kind of the summary level of the suggestions I have for managing people, and I think would help really any project manager in any industry kind of be successful in their career. So just kind of like wrapping up here, just make sure you understand the process, make sure you have the education, make sure you have the knowledge by working on yourself, and being able to lead effectively. You understand that when you get into dispute, right? Disputes can cut both ways. And if you find a way, if you provide those notices that people have the opportunity to mitigate those delays, you'll find that if you don't have a delay and you don't have a cost impact, then there's no dispute. But if you are going to dispute it, if you want to be like me and save your job, you get into it 100%, because at the end of the day, if you do get into a dispute and it goes into litigation, really what kind of happens, even when things get into mitigation, people just start talking about numbers. So you need to make sure you capture all your costs, and if it does get into it, that's the route you have to take. You kind of have to make that decision of getting into it 100%, and don't cut yourself short. So, and that's really kind of highlighted. Again, I talked about giving notice. So the next part of this presentation, I think, will get a little bit funner, kind of show off some of our projects here, and really just want to talk about managing Mother Nature, which is probably the second most hardest problem for construction project managers on the job site. This is actually a photo of a job we did over in Pocatello. You can kind of see here, there's a pretty gnarly project going on here, but there's actually, I don't know if you guys can see my arrow, we had to completely dewater this excavation and had some pretty gnarly shoring to keep the soil and the earthwork from caving in on the project, because there were some existing buildings that needed to stay in place. But anyway, there's like 6 wells around this project, around this building, a whole perimeter drain, and I think there's about 8 pumps in this thing pumping to this pond out here, which was a settling pond, and then it would filter out through a check dam and then go to the Port Neuf River. So pretty challenging there. I think the thing about groundwater is you can't predict it. Nobody knows quite what the soil conditions are until you dig it up, and the more permeable the soil is, the more water comes in. So it can be very, very difficult. But I'm gonna get into right now kind of one of the biggest highlights here of project management is in construction is knowing that winter's always coming, right? You gotta understand that winter will kill your job. It'll kill your productivity. I mean, guys will lose bolts and tools in the snow, and nobody likes working out in the cold. Your productivity goes down tenfold during the winter. So as a project manager, hopefully you've got the field experience to kind of understand, yeah, hey, when you're doing your baseline schedule in that organization, get your buildings built before winter comes. Get that thing dried in so that you can, here's another example, sorry, this is actually over in Salt Lake City, a project we're doing down there. This was actually pretty recent. We got this building dried in, the roof's on, and so the trades can do the work on the inside. And so you can kind of see some examples here of some photos. A lot of stuff in the wastewater treatment world. There's a lot of piping, a lot of electrical work inside these wastewater treatment plants that need to be done. So if you can get that building enclosed and dried in, your trades can work on the inside during the winter, and that's key to managing your construction project and saving your productivity and thus your budget. Here's another project in Pocatello. We were able to beat the winter here too and get this thing mostly done. I had to do the asphalt paving later on. This is a project here in Caldwell. It's a wastewater treatment plant. This one we didn't quite get done with the winterization. This was kind of during the colder winter months, but we were pretty fortunate that year. It was pretty warm winter. You can kind of see here there's some tarps over there that are covering some CMU blocks, and had to put a bunch of heat in there. And propane is expensive. So groundwater, again, that's Pocatello. Groundwater, just super challenging. This is, again, Caldwell, kind of a little bit earlier in the project. You can kind of see there's some groundwater over here by this dozer. It was about, our excavation here is about 8 feet deep, and groundwater is right about 5. And then over here in this foundation, there's about a 20-foot excavation. And again, just a lot of wells and perimeter drain piping. And in the past, I've kind of gone out to engineers and say, hey, can you kind of forecast how many gallons per minute are going to come in? And they always put together a number, and then we dig it up, and it's never the same number. And the reality is, it's just because nobody can really forecast, even if you have drill logs on the soil materials, to really grasp how permeable that soil is going to be. So, and last and foremost on groundwater, though, is just make sure you got backup power, because when you don't, your pump fails and your work site gets flooded. So, Mother Nature, man. The next thing is really gravity, right? The next thing on Mother Nature is gravity. Make sure you guys get your cranes kind of figured out and put in the right spot. A lot of thought and process into that. Here's an example again of Caldwell where you guys can see kind of the cranes and the chaos of the organization of the laydown yards there. Another thing on gravity, this is that Pocatello job, is just gravity, right? This is actually in Pocatello, and this building is actually a little pump house for, I don't know if you guys have driven to Pocatello, Idaho, but there's a big Simplot phosphorus factory over there. This is actually where they pump all their waste out of that factory. So needless to say, we could not have that building fall into our excavation. We're building this new building, this new filter building. We had to get kind of crazy here with some of these micro piles and installing some of these structural channels to support that existing 24-inch pipe. So anyway, kind of the shoring system is we had to drive a bunch of 30-foot soil nails and put in a bunch of chain link fence and shotcrete the base of that wall. So that was a pretty gnarly little means and methods there to kind of mitigate the nature there and gravity and keeping existing structures around. Another thing on gravity is kind of mitigating. This is a job in Salt Lake, and kind of transporting this big 63-inch HDP pipe, getting it into ground here where there's a bunch of utilities that we needed to kind of slip this thing into. So again, using excavators and big toys to kind of get that accomplished. And all things that you kind of have to work out, as a project manager, working with your field staff, coming up with a plan that's safe and that'll actually work. So hopefully that kind of gives you guys an idea of kind of some of the things we do there. This is a project over here in Salt Lake. Again, these are some existing bioreactors, and we had to lift 10,000-pound pieces of pipe clear into these bays on these bioreactors, which is super hard, right? There's not a magic wand that construction guys have to just wave something into place. So we had to do a lot of pre-planning and put together a big 500-ton crane to go lift those into place. But having those kind of plans and that kind of project management on the construction level is really key to helping your field guys out. Again, this is another photo from Pocatello. Soil nails, again, kind of that shotcrete shoring I was showing earlier. And again, gravity, you got some elevated deck shoring here to replace our concrete decks. So you can see that there. Again, kind of some more shotcrete. We actually micropiled to the foundation here and supported that. Had a live pipeline here, had to support that guy, and then had the soldier pile and steel lagging on that excavation. So Mother Nature, this isn't really quite Mother Nature, but I'm going to throw it on here, kind of like Mother Nature and miscellaneous, which is truck drivers. So this was in that Twin Falls wastewater treatment plant. And we had this truck driver bring in this $200,000 brand new generator that provides backup power to the whole plant. And the guy got stuck on the road coming down the hill into the canyon. And it just so happened that we were right in the middle of a concrete pour, and this guy completely blocked the entire road. So we had concrete trucks backed up. And if you guys know anything about concrete, you know, like it's wet at first, and then after some time it gets hard, and then it's really hard to get out, right? So this was a big problem for us. I remember this was kind of my early days in construction, and I remember seeing this and called the superintendent on the project. I was like, "Oh, this is what's going on," and he showed up and he's like, "Man, I'm not touching this." And so he called that truck driver to get a wrecker to come out there and tow and basically pull that back in. But in the moment, I was like, "Gosh, man, that superintendent made the right call there, man. Like, if we would have come up there and grabbed a forklift or loader or try to move it ourselves and something happened and that generator, that $200,000 generator just rolled down the hill, you know, we probably would have been on the hook if we would have touched it." So you know, even managing risk and that sort of thing, you can learn from the field guys out there is kind of my point. The other thing on Mother Nature, so this is a project over in Twin Falls again. We had to leak test this big IFAS basin, which is about 1 million gallons of water, and it we let it sit overnight, right? So these leak tests are about a week. You got to let the water sit in there, and you got to fix any cracks in the concrete to make sure, you know, wastewater doesn't leak out of the concrete tank. Well, we let it sit overnight, and then one of the plugs to one of the piping penetrations blew. You can kind of see here it basically eroded on the backside of that IFAS basin underneath this brand new blower building that we built. So you can kind of see the level of erosion that took place. And I remember, you know, I kind of go back to the whole puppy dog effect. Remember, I was working, I went to work back in Boise on Friday, and the superintendent called me. He's like, "Matt, we got a problem, man." I was like, "Okay, well, what is it?" And he's like, "Well, one of the plugs blew, the water eroded the whole side and underneath the existing blower building." And I was just like, "Oh man, like, well, what else happened?" And he just kind of like stopped and he like started laughing, and he was like, "What do you mean, what else happened?" Like, you know, and I was just kind of like, okay. And when he called me, I was kind of like, that moment, I was like, "Oh crap, this is like a bad deal." But you know, what would the puppy dog say? Like, you know, just like, well, what else is going on? Like, what else do we need to handle today? You know, like, we'll get after it. And then, you know, long story short, drove over there. We kind of took some photos, sent in an RFI, a request for information. The engineer proposed to backfill this with a CLSM, which is a low strength concrete mix, to kind of backfill and then support this building. But so anyway, I think that whole puppy dog thing really kind of works, you know, with your team. You know, when a problem comes up, don't sweat it. You know, there's a solution out there, and you'll get her solved. So if you kind of come with that attitude, you know, you can really kind of stop panic maybe in some of your teammates and that sort of thing. So here's a photo of us putting that CLSM, so you can kind of see how that went down. So anyway, that's kind of a wrap up. I mean, those are the major Mother Nature things that I see are a problem for project managers in the construction industry. You know, winter, groundwater, and really gravity. Those are the big keys, I think, to success. If you can figure those out, you'll be a successful construction project manager. So in closing, I just want to kind of wrap up kind of my keys for you guys to take with you maybe after this project, which is really, you know, coach the player, not the game. You know, and that includes you in a lot of ways. You know, understand the dispute process, avoid if possible. Communication is key to mitigating problems. Giving notice of the problem so that everybody has the opportunity to mitigate it is super important. Mother Nature, you know, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and adapt, because ultimately in construction, something always happens, and you just got to adapt. And lastly, if you got positive attitude and you're like, you know, if you bring the same excitement energy in your day as this guy, everybody likes working for that guy. So, and there's a photo, I think, actually on some of our job sites, people work with their dogs in their in their drawers. So anyway, that's it. So I'll just kind of open it up. Maybe Jennifer, you can open up for any questions or comments. But that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Sure, thank you. I really, really, really love the picture of the puppy. It is such a good visual, and it just reminds me of when I was building my home and how the builder just knew exactly how to deal with me. Calm, cool, collected, always happy to see me. I was, having an issue with something. It usually took him, he would just have to repeat himself 3 times, and then I was in. And he would say it very smooth, always with a smile every time. But that puppy dog, that is a really good visual aid to remind yourself how would he respond. I love that. I'm not seeing any questions come up on chat, but let's see.
So Jen, I think Don did have one comment early on in the presentation, and I think it was when Matt was talking about problems in the manufacturing environment or the construction management, and Don had said it is an issue in a manufacturing environment as well, throw it over the wall kind of mentality. He says it's always quote unquote our problem, meaning not their problem, I presume. If you want, I can open up mics and I can open up the questions, and unless you want it just geared to Q&A to organizers only, because that's how we have it set up right now and no mics are on.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and open it up and
Yeah, that'd be great.
questions or comments.
Well, I have a kind of not related to your presentation, but sort of question. In the picture of Coach Pete, he was actually smiling in that picture. And when I saw him coaching at Washington last year, he looked like he wanted to die.
Well, I know that team bought into his philosophy at that point, so those were good times.
Yeah, and he's been grinding a long time, so
yeah, for
you
sure.
wear out eventually. So what kind of habits did you get from working under Coach Pete that lend themselves nicely in the work world?
Oh, I'm sorry, you kind of cut out. Can you repeat that?
What kind of habits did you learn from Coach Pete that lend themselves nicely in the work world?
Oh man, well there's a ton. I could have a whole nother presentation on that. Coach Pete was he didn't really coach football, which is surprising. Most people are surprised to hear that, but he really didn't coach football when I was there. Our position coaches coached us on how to be better football players, and he just coached us how to be, great at life, right? And having a great attitude and work ethic, and kind of doing that day-to-day stuff. Showing up to meetings early. And well, another thing that he had, it was kind of like even if you're not feeling it, he'd always say fake it, right? And I remember there's times in 2 days or during summer workouts, we're running decks or doing that sort of thing where, coach would be like, hey, if you're not feeling it, fake it, and the next thing you know, you got a guy like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy for this next deck run. I'm can't wait for, the next practice today, and people would start laughing and, hearing the sarcastic kind of voice, but the next thing you knew, other people would start, being sarcastic and, just faking that they wanted to be there, even though everybody's like, oh man, we're grinding, we all hurt, our muscles are sore, we're mentally tired. And, when people just started to make it fun by being sarcastic, then all of a sudden it was practice had this huge energy, right, around it where people just started, excelling, and we had a super productive practice. And quite frankly, that goes hand in hand with what I do as a project manager. If people in the room are excited to be there, solutions just seem to happen and things get done, right? So that's another thing that he, kind of preached to us. Even if things are tough, fake it, and then next thing you know, all that energy makes it so that you are excited to be there. So. But there's many more. There's so many more. I learned a lot from that guy. So
I've got some more for you, Matt. We've got one from, I'm not sure if it's Jaime or Jamie. but I'm going to guess Jaime. In general, how much contingency do contractors such as RSCI put into dewatering activities?
A lot. It depends on the job. But as a construction company, we have a lot of experience doing wastewater work. Typically we'll take a look at the geotechnical reports, try to find what kind of soil it is out there, what the permeability is, right? Which means, how fast water flows through it, right? If you got like a gravel type material, water is going to flow way faster than if you had like a clay soil material. And quite frankly, there's different means of dewatering. And the soil material really kind of dictates which means and methods you use for that. But for the most part, we have a bunch of historical data on past projects that we've done, which we track. We track our costs on dewatering, so we have a pretty good idea of, how much it costs, and all those factors as far as the geotechnical report and that sort of thing, and historical data on how much it costs us to dewater a structure, and how long it's going to take, right? How long is it going to take us to go excavate, build all the concrete, leak test the water tanks before we can backfill. All those things go into that cost. So as far as contingency goes, I mean, we're if it's a low bid project, we try to bid it at what we think it's going to cost. So that's I think our approach is really just I wouldn't consider we approach that with a contingency. It's more of using historical cost records. And kind of analyzing that geotechnical report that really puts our price on dewatering activities.
Okay, got another one from Tammy Thomas, IT project manager for MDU Resources. Curious how you create a schedule and allow for all of the weather unknowns.
So what I do is I go through and I actually get on NOAA's website, and I go look at the historical weather data in the area, and typically I find out, what the average. Usually I look at, for the most part, the precipitation days, how many precipitation days or how many days there's like a major snow event, and I usually find like a 3-year average of the area, and then I'll put in my schedule basically a non-working day for weather. Some contracts, if you're working for the Army Corps of Engineers, usually they'll tell you how many weather days you can put in your schedule, and that's what you have to do. And if you end up having more, then you can request for a time extension. But typically most contracts just say, hey, you need to factor in a reasonable amount of weather days to accomplish the work and still get it done on time. So, when I use NOAA's website and put together kind of a brief narrative, hey, any day where there's over a half-inch of rain, I blocked out on my schedule, right? Or however many days they're on average per year have over a half-inch of rain, or maybe it's 3 inches of snow, is kind of what I block out. So you have to kind of put that into your narrative, and really on your schedule, you show that as a non-working day. So when you do all your construction activities, you have a duration for it, and those activities don't taking weather days. So I will say that when you do your construction activities, if I had to build a concrete slab in summertime and I had to build the same concrete slab in winter, the duration for that activity on my schedule is far greater on the winter activity because it's going to take longer. So those are all factors that I put into those schedules, and you got to try to forecast that as realistically as possible.
So you mentioned that NOAA, so National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, right? So is there a special location or app within NOAA that you like to use?
No, I can't remember. I got a little tab saved on my computer here that I use, but really I think if you just go to NOAA, you can go click at climate records and then punch in the town that you're working in or whatever, and from there then you can pull up reports on all the weather for every day for the last 3 years or whatever. So, or you can do a 3-year average. They have a bunch of reports that you can use. It's super handy.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another one from Rod Reed. Do you like to do design build projects better than design bid build?
I do. I mean, I kind of like all projects really. I guess my spiel is I feel like, we love to do design build projects here at RSCI. We feel that our experience in construction really gives, if we team up with an engineering firm, our constructability reviews with the engineer hand in hand, we really kind of establish, that team effort here as far as, working together and looking good together to get that done. But at the same breath, even if we do a hard bid project, we're out there to make everybody look good, and in our expertise and our technical ability, just because we've done so much of this stuff, we have solutions to just about every problem that we've seen. So, it really kind of depends. But yeah, I mean, we love to do design build if there's an opportunity. I think, in the industry, more and more owners are going towards design build, but it's still somewhat new, and some owners just like to go do the old-fashioned rip and read hard bid projects. So, if it's wastewater or dam type projects, heavy civil, we like to bid them all. So that's kind of our thoughts on design build and hard bid.
Okay, we got another one from Laura. It's Cooler. Oh my gosh, this is really great for me to have to pronounce these names. I used to have a really hard name, but this Suler or Coolar. How do you handle when your schedule doesn't? Oh, I thought that someone was stepping in. How do you handle when your schedule doesn't match the target completion date established by the customer or high-level management?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of possibilities there. Let's just say it's not an act of God or not a fault of the owner or the engineer, right? So if it's solely the contractor, let's just say we're building concrete and it's just taking a lot longer than what we thought. When I do schedules, I always do a monthly update, and that really is like a check for me to know, hey team, how are we doing? Is an area slipping, or because if it is, then that's where I focus my efforts on. Then I'll go out there on site, go walk around with the superintendent, take a look at what's going on. Hey, you're doing this, this way. If we change it up this way, is that going to be faster? Is that going to be more productive? So doing those monthly schedule updates is key to making sure that you can identify quickly, oh shoot, a delay is starting to happen on this activity, right? And when that delay starts to happen, as a manager, you can quickly focus attention there to find a solution to whatever the problem is, right? If there's a delay, right? So typically in your contracts in construction industry, if there's an act of God, right? Which, maybe there's an earthquake or a hurricane or a pandemic, right? That we're all in. Acts of God say, hey, you can have a contract extension, right? So, but neither side, neither the contractor or the owner can kind of penalize each other for an act of God, right? It's hey, it's an act of God, everybody loses, right? You just pay for your own stuff. Whereas if there's a delay from the owner or the engineer, if there's all of a sudden you're halfway doing the job and the owner's hey, I want to completely redesign this, and it's okay, as a contractor, I'm well, do I stop? And then if I stop, how long for your design? And then, I get your design, I can price it, and we negotiate pricing, and then, we get through this middle process, and then I procure the materials, and there's probably lead items on the materials, that shows up, and then we can finally install and get it done, right? That's reimbursable, right? That's a compensable delay where I can get reimbursed, typically in contracts for owner delays. But you do that monthly schedule update, to manage your own crews and your subcontractors, that sort of thing. That's key to identifying, if an area is slipping or not. So if it does slip, high level management, if it does slip, kind of give everybody notice, right? That's kind of where I talk about, put the problem on the table, right? Give notice, give everybody the opportunity to mitigate it, right? So, typically what I do on a schedule update, if I see something starting to slip or a delay, I'll go out there, I'll have a conversation with the field staff, and we'll make a plan to get back on track. And if you can't, then you might have to show that delay. And then, yeah, you got to go talk to your boss and your ownership and the owner of the project and kind of explain why things are going the way they are. And if you build those good relationships with people, and you kind of really as this photo shows, you're truly working on it together, and trying to make everybody look good. I think you'll find most people are not trying to, put penalties on other people. I think people generally have a very good understanding of what's fair and want everybody to succeed. So sometimes you can have those discussions with owners and kind of get lucky, and they kind of feel bad for you, like, hey, yeah, I can help you out here. But it really goes back to, in my mind, keeping the owners and the engineers, keeping their heads out of the contract, and more so shaking hands and walking the site together and working together to get the job built on time and taking care of each other. So.
Hey, Jen, this is Dave. Can I jump in with a question, comment?
Sure.
Hey, so, I'm obviously a Matt's twin brother, so we have beers, pretty regularly on a weekly cadence and just kind of compare notes. But, he didn't really speak onto it, but, early on in his career at RSCI, he had a very difficult project with the Pocatello. And so I watched him work his tail off, and, I saw him, have to do things like put his family on the back burner. He gained about 25 pounds because he was so stressed, right? And so I just wanted to, give Matt an opportunity to talk about, how do you deal with kind of these, epic iron sharpens iron type projects, and kind of, how he kind of gets through those, and how it's paid off for him in his career, right? Because, he is very well respected for, being able to go through that kind of a grind. And so maybe, Matt, you can kind of give us some color on, on those difficult projects and how to embrace those and how to get through those and kind of the benefits at the end.
Well, sure. I mean, like, the long and short of it is, I mean, that job is still in some disputes, and I don't want to get too much into the details just because I know there's a litigation issue involved with that. So I don't want to get too much into details on that. Because there's a court case coming up here, I think, in March. So, but kind of like Dave said, I mean, I don't know, it was just kind of a grind, it was just, we got into it. It was a buzzsaw. The owner of our company was like, man, I think you got the top 3 worst projects in your career right off the bat. And it was kind of hard and difficult in the beginning. I was kind of like, I got the job, and then kind of like immediately, I was like, this is bad. We got a really combative engineer owner on this thing, and I kind of was raising my hand. I was like, hey, boss, these are the signs, these are red flags, this is kind of what's going down. I think this is going to be a challenging job, and I just continue to communicate that, right? And like I said, just continue to bring up the issues, put it on the table, make sure everybody's informed. The last thing you want to do is, go try to fight a job like Pocatello by yourself, and especially not let your boss, who, has financial skin in the game on this whole deal, not let him, know what's going on. So for me, it was a grind. I kind of was, full of energy, and just really, I kind of had a commitment, to the team and all the field guys out there that, hey, I was going to finish this thing, and we're going to get through it together. And, I kind of just took it upon myself, to be kind of the bad cop in that project, so to speak. And that's kind of what my role needed to be. For that. But it was a lot of weekend works. And I think it was about 3 months straight. I was working about 7 days a week, which is too much. But I don't know. I mean, it just kind of depends. I just I wanted that job to succeed and kind of get done. And my boss supported me a lot. I think just keeping him informed and communicating with him, kind of helped him stay on my side of things. And and even when things were dark on that job, I go back to the puppy dog. It didn't matter. Come in in the morning, and you're gonna grind. But if you're really feeling bad, just start faking it. And so I think even though it kind of sucked, and we had a lot of my boss and I, we drove to Pocatello, had a lot of call them these dispute resolution board meetings and that sort of thing that we had to go through, and they were not fun. But I think if you just have the right attitude, you can really get through anything. And when you understand the process of a dispute, right? If you're going to go to the contract and you're going to dispute and you're going to go by the contract, it's just a process, right? You can take the emotion out of it. I think the first 3 months of that job, I didn't realize that, and I was just really emotionally like, oh man, why are these guys being so hard? Why is, why all this stuff, right? It was just really emotional, right? But if you just kind of take that emotion out of it, it's like, hey, these guys just want to play by the contract. That's what it is, and we'll just follow it, and we'll go fight through it. And Yeah, so that's kind of what we did. So, you know, it was kind of easy for me once I understood the process. You know, just follow the steps, and then you let the lawyers take care of it.
Matt, thank you. That is all we have time for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Matt, thank you for a great presentation. And by the way, you did get a lot of kudos. We're coming through here. Thanks. Thanks for your time, Matt. So appreciate it.
And
Thank
before
you.
everybody leaves, I just need to make sure I get the PowerPoint presentation sometime today, and I will forward that out to the attendees.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
All right, bye-bye.
Oh, great pictures too. I see that. Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
All right. I'm going to stay on